This thought about balancing India existed in Pakistan from earlier days. But immediately after 1962 war, they moved in quickly to reassure China of their friendship, which, which till then had two problems. One problem was that Pakistan had joined Western Alliance, and obviously the Western Alliance was against the communists, and China was part of the Russian system. So there was a need for Pakistan to then rebalance. Secondly, Pakistan realized that sooner or later, India being a bigger country, is going to be superior to China, Pakistan in military sphere as well as other spheres. So therefore, it is good to, have China on its side. Immediately thereafter, they moved to, of course, sign the boundary deal. But very soon in 1965, the reality dawned on them that it's not all hunky dory. They can't simply go and marry up with them. When Ayub Khan went to China, which also became a pattern subsequently for all the Pakistani leaders, that in case of any difficulty, they should visit China first and there, before and after. So when he went there and asked for help during the 1965 war, then the Chinese Foreign Minister Li Fang and the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister Chow En-lai, told Field Marshal Ayub Khan that Pakistan must continue to fight and wage a guerrilla war against India, even if one or two big cities are lost. And if necessary, they should recede to the mountains to continue waging a guerrilla war. Ayub Khan saw the kind of the lack of commitment on China's part, hesitation on China's part to help Pakistan, came back and immediately declared ceasefire, or offered to declare ceasefire. Now, similar thing happened in 1971 when Bhutto went there in the month of November and asked for assurances. When Kissinger at the same time was egging on China to make some move, but China refused to make that move. And China simply told them that we will continue applying pressure on India till as long as possible. China, of course, had helped in raising of two infantry divisions for Pakistan, had supplied quite a lot of stuff directly to East Pakistan, and also given $100 million worth of aid. Plus, it has interceded on behalf of Pakistan in the United Nations and got a ceasefire agreement, which was not unfavorable to Pakistan. It was, in fact, bailing out Pakistan. But despite that, these actions showed that there were limits to this cooperation. And these limits were further, they came about further during 1999 when Musharraf went to China and Nawaz Sharif went to China. China curtly told them to start negotiations with India in the spirit of Lahore Agreement and also withdraw and also sort of respect the sanctity of the line of control. We must also remember that even after the parliament attack, Zhu Rongji, the Prime Minister of China, came visiting India soon thereafter. And China also, for a change, lifted its veto at the United Nations Security Council in naming Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jamaat Dawa as part of proscribed sort of entities. Although, of course, they still continue to block Hamid Gul's being nomination as a terrorist supporter. Now, this shows the limit up to which China has gone. But where it has gone, let us see that. China started arming Pakistan very seriously in 60s only. And it was in 65 that Bhutto started talking to China about help in nuclearizing the relationship. It took many years before it took 10 odd years before China agreed to start delivering sort of help in nuclear field. And we must all appreciate one thing, that whereas normal equipping by way of providing conventional weapons, etc., giving economic aid, etc., is a very strong element of the relationship. But when somebody gives strategic weapons to a country, that is the ultimate test of friendship and trust that one can show. And that is what actually has, to an extent, helped Pakistan to survive as a nation, that it has not disintegrated. and is also given it some kind of autonomy and ability to continue proxy war against India. So therefore, China, in the ultimate analysis, has provided Pakistan with tools with which it can defend itself. But was it acting actually in an altruistic manner? Of course not. There is no doubt that what China has done for Pakistan is much greater than what Pakistan could have done. So when some Chinese expert was asked as to why so, he said, "Look, we don't expect Pakistan to do anything more than what it naturally does. That is good enough for us." And what was that good enough? You see, China initially considered India as a competitor, and that was also the reason why they were trying to put down Pandit Nehru all the time, and probably one of the major reasons why they went to war with India in 1962. But subsequently, after the opening of Chinese economy in 1978, and the gap that opened between India and China, a very wide gap economically, and concomitantly the gap in military spending, military preparedness, in the diplomatic heft, etc., made China disdainful of India. And they always called India as someone is a pretender, and who's trying to show that it can fit in big boots, but it is nowhere close to China, and it will never be able to come. Now, certain events happened which changed that perception, and the biggest of that was the nuclear tests of 1998. China was shocked out of its wits. And also, that was subsequently when India's economy also started growing up. Then China started taking very serious note of India. So, as a result of which, the nuclear help, the missile help in missile field, like M11 came first, and then came M9, and M9, 30 odd boxes, crates of M9 missiles were there at the Sargodha airfield for many days, which were filmed by Americans and everybody else. That happened, and subsequently they gave them 5,000 ring magnets. And when in 1982, when Ziaul Haq told Deng Xiaoping that our nuclear enrichment plan is going slow. So that's the time when hundreds of kilograms of highly enriched uranium ingots were supplied directly on Deng Xiaoping's orders to Pakistan to speed up its nuclear weapons preparation. And in 1990, when the Pakistani nuclear bomb was tested at Lucknow by the Chinese. So all this showed that China had all along continued doing it, continued supporting Pakistan. Sometimes uh, they were in cahoots with America. America had been old friends with Pakistan, and at least two periods which were very, very crucial, in which China and America both leaned in favor of Pakistan were. First is during 1971, that is when uh, Pakistan midwifed improvement of relationship between Pakistan and China. It is, you remember, when Henry Kissinger complained of stomach ache and went incommunicado for 24 hours. And that's the time when he was taken in a Pakistan International Airlines flight to Beijing for talk with Zhou Enlai. And subsequently Nixon's visit took place and all that. And America always rewarded Pakistan for that, for giving them an opening. That was one period. Second period was when China-Russia relations themselves were very strained, and America and China combined together to break up Soviet Union by starting the war in Afghanistan for pushing out Soviet Union from Afghanistan. That was another time when these two countries were together. Of course, this was punctuated by many other periods, like in 1990s, when this export of M9 and M11 missiles were detected. And besides that, America had got many intelligence inputs which they shared with the Pakistanis and which they shared with the Chinese, as to how various Chinese firms were trying to procure equipment for Pakistan's strategic weapons program, even from other countries like Russia. They were shared with China. And when China continued helping Pakistan, That is the time when America imposed sanctions, and those sanctions had started at the time of Tiananmen Square. China was in doghouse. Everybody was against China at that time, but China still continued to support Pakistan. Now, so therefore, there is something in this relationship that has been enduring, despite some people calling it the most paradoxical kind of a relationship. It's not an alliance, but deeper than an alliance, deeper than most alliances, because even in formal alliances, people don't share nuclear technology with others, nuclear weapon designs with others, nuclear testing with others, and strategic weapon, other ballistic missiles with others. But here they have done that. It is also paradoxical because the value systems of the two countries don't match. The political systems of the two countries don't match. Pakistanis see West and the Middle East as their reference point. Pakistanis don't see China as a reference point for their culture, for their society, for the economy, or for anything like that. But despite that, this has been going on. So let us see, what does Pakistan get out of this relationship? Well, for Pakistan, in true sense, it's a matter of survival. Pakistan sees in China a long-term ally for its economic and strategic well-being, geopolitical well-being. Pakistan also knows that China is the last point of call for them when everybody else has ditched them. When America distanced themselves from Pakistan after 65 war, China came to their rescue. When Pakistan was again in doghouse after the Soviet Union's withdrawal, and after it came under sanctions, China came to its halt. When Saudi Arabia started distancing itself recently, China came to its halt. So it is that. Pakistan also sees China as a tool to manage India, to say a more powerful friend. So therefore, to manage India, China's friendship is necessary. And it's, of course, it also sees it as a constant source of supply of weapons, arms, weapons, technology, and financial aid. And what does China see this? To my mind, there are many things that China looks at Pakistan for which it is rewarding it. One, of course, is it thinks that its restive Western China, particularly Xinjiang, becomes more manageable if Pakistan is stable, and if Uyghurs do not get any support from the terrorist elements operating from Pakistani soil. They also want to, in a way, leverage the Pakistani intelligence's entry into the networks. All jihadi networks everywhere in the world has a Pakistani connection and in connection with Pakistani intelligence. China wants to leverage that instead of being angry about it, instead of being being resentful about it. China simply wants to leverage that. For example, many of us know that uh, Mullah Omar, the elusive Taliban leader, the only foreign ambassador with whom he met was a Chinese ambassador, whose meeting was facilitated by ISI in Quetta. Similarly, in many other times, with other terrorist groups, Pakistanis have facilitated the meeting of the Chinese diplomats and intelligence officers in Pakistan. And in any case, as far as Uyghurs are concerned, I think they have done enough. It's the Pakistanis who killed the ETIM leader Mahasoon there. In fact, sometimes America has helped in Chinese wittingly or unwittingly in dealing with Uyghurs. Abdul Haq al-Turkestani and Abdul Sakur, both who came into the leadership of ETIM after Masoon was killed, were killed by American drones. So, in a way, America and China have also collaborated in it. And many a time when American support was flagging back, Chinese encouraged them to go and support and give more weapons and give more financial aid to Pakistan. And when China was holding back, that this time America encouraged them to do so. But coming back to the point as to what China looks for in China, what kind of help does it require from Pakistan? One, like I said, managing its internal security threats by way of controlling Uyghurs. Now, Pakistani government has been trying to tackle Uyghurs all right. But as far as the ecosystem of terrorism in Pakistan and Afghanistan is concerned, they have been a little more receptive of Uyghurs. Not because they have their heart into confronting China, or that they want them to start taking action in Xinjiang, but simply because they get more working hands, they get more jihadis in their ranks. So it is that way. Otherwise, if you see, whether it be Jamaat Ulema Islam, whether it's Fazlul Haq, whether it is Jamaat Islami, or any other sort of religious leaders in Pakistan, all of them have privileged good relationship with China over their sympathy for their co-religionists. In fact, amongst the causes, popular causes in Pakistan, support for Uyghurs in Xinjiang comes very, very low. And in any of the maps of the caliphate that you see, you don't find mention of Eastern Turkmenistan, Turkestan or Xinjiang at all. So therefore, Pakistan has helped China in managing this internal threat. Number two, Pakistan also has given an opening to China, to Islamic world. Now remember, I know it for certain and with personal experience that it was Pakistan which brought in Turkey and China together. To the extent that China started sending lakhs of tourists, specifically with direct flights to Turkey. It gave them the A88 rocket for testing in there, and I know when I interacted with some people who were part of this testing, and 7 Pakistani officers also there living in a hotel next to my house where I happened to interact with them. So they brought them together, and in 2009, after a series of incidents in China in which the Uyghurs were supposed to have been involved, including in Beijing, uh, in the Forbidden City where they killed 9 people. In Kunming, they killed about 32 people in stabbing, etc. And 15 odd Hans were killed in Urumqi itself. At that time, Erdogan, as Prime Minister of Turkey, has said this is genocide, and China can never be excused and all that. Pakistan interceded on behalf of China, and after 2 years, same Turkey sent its president Abdullah Gül to Urumqi to make conciliatory noises and all that. So Pakistan has been useful for China in opening up to the Islamic world and to sort of intercede on behalf of it as far as this image and sort of its perceptions are concerned. Third, going forward, as China has always thought that it has a Malacca dilemma, as you know. In order to overcome the Malacca dilemma, and opening to Gwadar, opening to the Arabian Sea coast was an important consideration for them. And as China is now, China's ambitions have risen and it wants to be a world power. Opening to the two oceans, that's the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, becomes an imperative. So a Pakistan which is ready to provide its sea coast for Chinese naval activities, which a former ambassador of China to India had said that Pakistani coast, including Gwadar, Ormara, and Karachi, will certainly be a major staging post for Chinese Navy whenever it intends to go deeper into Indian Ocean, to Mediterranean, or to Persian Gulf. So therefore, that consideration, although officially when they talk about it, they always say that Gwadar is a civilian port. Gwadar will never become a military port and all that. But from all actions of theirs, it is turning out to be a military port. And in the next couple of years, we will see this as a formal military post for Pakistan. Please remember that all the equipment that Pakistan gives to the China gives to Pakistan, including Type 039 AIP equipped submarines, Type 054 frigates. It's MQ16, MQ7, and MQ9 sort of air-to-air missiles, which are derivatives from Tomahawk, which Pakistan had collected from Balochistan after 1998 Kenya, Tanzania, American embassy attacks by Al Qaeda. And when Al Qaeda was attacked in Pakistan, so one of the missiles, Tomahawk, had fallen down in Balochistan, which Pakistan took it, gave it to China, shared it with China, and they reverse engineered it, and those are available now in both the countries. So even that. So all these things that have been happening just go to show that uh, this Makran coast of Pakistan will be a very, very important staging post for Chinese naval forces as China now grows to become a world power. Fourth, of course, the surplus capital and the factories, etc., that they're dismantling in China for the reasons of pollution, etc., environmental concerns. Pakistan is available for relocating those. Pakistan, if CPEC succeeds, that also becomes a model for China's BRI to impress other countries that they should also benefit from it and all that. But the most important factor, which actually has provided a glue to this relationship, is balancing of India, which is in interest of both the countries. The very fact that Pakistan has received nuclear weapons and strategic missiles from them, it simply goes to show that balancing India is the thing, is the name of the game. Uh, Three quotes come to my mind. Two quotes come to my mind. One was the Chinese intelligence chief, General Gong Kai, when he was discussing with his American counterparts in Washington. He terms and they questioned him as to why they were supporting Pakistan against India in a manner they were doing. He said, Pakistan is China's Israel. It could be sarcastic comment, but more importantly suggests the kind of importance they give to Pakistan being strong enough to resist India, so that it can tie down Indian forces over there. It can distract its political, diplomatic, and strategic energy, which, if unleashed, can be used against China to balance China. So, as long as Pakistan manages to, make India waste its energies on the Western Front, it helps China growth. That glue, I think, is the strongest glue. The second quote is from a Pakistani commentator called Azazuddin. He writes for the Dawn many a time. Many of you must have heard. A couple of years back, he made a statement which I recollect, in which he said, Pakistan loves China for what it can do for them. And China loves Pakistan irrespective of what it does to itself. Which means that China's expectations from Pakistan are not great as long as it can fulfill that one basic thing, basic requirement of balancing India, managing India. All other things are negotiable. All other things can be done away with. And that is why my friend Professor Sumit Ganguly has called Pakistan as the principal strategic surrogate of China. Chinese, when they look at their friendships, you see, in the ultimate analysis, and if China has to grow big, and recently what has happened is that many younger scholars, younger commentators and analysts in China have now started paying more attention to Pakistan, and they are Pakistan specialists now. So, as far as they are concerned, their recommendations to their governments frequently, that I come across many of their readings suggest that as China is going to be a global power, China should not shy away from balance of power games. China should not shy away from acknowledging rivalry with India and supporting Pakistan openly. So they are saying that. And this, I think, the Chinese government has taken that seriously. It is because of this that China is no more concerned about India's sensitivities when it provides any help to Pakistan, and when it goes and makes statements which are blatantly false And it does not really think twice before making those statements against India, be it about Kashmir, be it about anything else. So therefore, this kind of deep relationship, which is basically focused on India, or brought about by common rivalry towards India, is likely to sustain. But are there any downsides to this relationship? I think yes, there are. The first downside is this. You see, China would like Pakistan to be less terrorist friendly. Though it has helped China in controlling Uyghurs, but still, the ecosystem, as long as the ecosystem contains, that situation can change. And if divergences between China and Pakistan on the issues of CPEC, how China starts when China starts taking back loans and Pakistan's economy is stretched, and that can metamorphose into a kind of a dissonance supported by the religious elements, then the situation about Uyghurs can also change. So therefore, China wants this to happen, but Pakistan is not letting go of that addiction of nurturing jihadis. So that is one. Secondly, even between India and Pakistan, the relationship between India and Pakistan, China would want it to be more predictable relationship. China would probably want that there should be a managed mistrust between the two countries, which America and others can manage, even these two countries can manage, and that there should be some kind of an economic activity between China and between Pakistan and India, so that Pakistan's economy doesn't become the burden only for China to lift. So it would want that to happen, but that's also not happening. Pakistan is intractably opposed to India, and it will never make peace with India, because it thinks that if it makes peace with India, then the rationale for its security policies being on top of every other policy it does not remain valid, and so therefore it's not going to do that. China is also worried that conventional or full-scale war between China and Pakistan, between Pakistan and India, would entail Pakistan flaunting its nuclear weapons and deploying them. And that's the time probably the jihadis can get hold of them. And that will be a nightmare for everybody. So therefore, there is a downside to the relationship. And that is why in most of these crisis situations between India and Pakistan, China has not only advised moderation to Pakistan itself bilaterally, but has also, with the help of America and all, have both been trying to influence both the countries to exercise moderation. So the couple of things that stand out is this. This relationship is more important to Pakistan for its survival, but it's very useful for China as well in managing rivalry with India. And as we know, that no country can become a superpower without being a hegemon or the unchallenged leader in its own region. And India, being the only potential rival who can manage China's hegemony in Asia, India is the only country with that kind of potential. The temporary dip in economic activity notwithstanding, I think there are all tools in place, and I am personally hopeful that India's economy will take off from now on. And with the kind of adjustments that we are making in our geopolitical and geostrategic connections, like Quad, for example, these are our own methods of balancing out China also, and these will become much more important. China today, when it looks at its friends, North Korea is an embarrassment as a friend. As far as other countries like Iran are concerned, they are in the doghouse themselves, and China doesn't have very strong relationship with them in any case. Cambodia, etc., being part of ASEAN, are also not reliable. The only reliable friend so far is Pakistan, who is offering its help and all that. So this will continue. This relationship will continue. Let's be sure. Then how are these countries going to behave now? How is Pakistan going to behave, and how is China going to behave? I think I'll leave this how Pakistan is expected to behave and how to deal with it to General Kakkar. I'll confine myself to speaking only about China as to how China is going to behave, and how do we manage China in this.
Maybe also request, sir, to conclude, so the other two speakers are also there. So
Yes, give me 2 minutes, please.
yeah,
Give
no,
me
no,
2 minutes.
you can take 5 minutes.
Recording in progress.
So give me 2 minutes, please. So what has happened is that as far as China is concerned, China has seems to have decided that India's relationship with India is irretrievable. India has crossed over to the other side. So the possibilities of cooperative relationship, only cooperative relationship or partnership with India is over. India has understood China's game that while they talk softly about India and they sometimes flatter India, but their trajectory has always been to balance India, to confine India to the subcontinent. India has understood that, so India is also talking not in is not rhetorical talking rhetorically, but India is taking solid steps to conserve its interests, to safeguard its interests. So China is expected to do everything that is to discomfit India, to dissuade India from going whole hog, to compete with India not only in Southeast Asia, which China considers as its area of influence, legitimate area of influence, but also will try and undermine India in South Asia, which it has been doing earlier, but now do it with greater force. China will continue supporting Pakistan in every possible way, not only financially, economically, but also in weapons transfer. Newer drones will come there. The cyber and space cooperation will definitely be there. New like AIP sort of submarines are coming, so those submarines will change the naval scenario to an extent. When when Iran comes out of the JCPOA deadlock, then one can expect China to really start taking more interest in Chabahar, to sign long-term energy deals with Iran, basically to firm up an alliance against India. Whether that will succeed or not, I don't know. But please expect China to always be difficult with India. Friendship with China will remain a chimera, will never come about. I think rest of the things will take over in question and answer session. And thank you very much for your patience.